Winikisak, Natasuis, Melissa Ferretti, Nutomas, Siquanamaquapaquet, Ka Natai Patuxet. What I said to you in my beloved language is, good day, my name is Melissa Ferretti. I am from the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe of Plymouth. I am the current chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. I am a mother and grandmother, raised by an elder of my tribe in Cedarville, a small village in the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. I have lived on my homelands all my life. I am honored to be here today as part of the 50th annual tradition of the National Day of Mourning to share this virtual message. As we gather on these beautiful homelands, what is now called Plymouth, Massachusetts, and what is also the homelands of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, let's always remember our ancestors. In my tenure as tribal chairwoman, I have made it my life's work to better serve my community and educate the public about the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe and its rich, well-documented history in the town of Plymouth, Bourne, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As a tribe located at the ground zero of colonization in Plymouth, we know well that there is little knowledge of the actual history and contemporary existence of tribal communities in the region. There is a long history of erasing, ignoring, and trying to silence Native peoples in New England and the United States. This is part of the struggles that say that we don't exist or that we should have no voice in matters that directly affect our lives and our rights. As a tribe whose ancestral homelands, along with the forests, fish, and other wildlife in the region, was used by the Pilgrims to serve their interests as colonists, we know that we and our tribal history are directly connected to the ongoing struggles of many other natives in communities in North America. Struggles that include the theft of native homelands and the genocidal impacts of Indian policy. Quite often, Native people feel invisible and dismissed. We are constantly having to validate our existence, explain who we are and where we are from. Something that could be explained in a classroom if only Native American and Indigenous studies were a necessary part of the curriculum. The goals of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe are to strengthen the awareness and study of the history, language, and pride of the Wampanoag Nation, and to preserve, promote, and protect the common welfare, cultural, spiritual, and economic well-being of our tribal members, particularly our tribal youth, our cultural heritage, our relationship to our sacred and ceremonial places within our ancient homeland, and our community-based values are the core of our Herring Pond Wampanoag tribal identity and heritage. We are committed to creating an equitable future for our youth and preparing them for a strong future as self-determining citizens of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. The Herring Pond Wampanoag Pondville Meeting House, built from an 1838 petition to the Commonwealth, the Pondville Meeting House has been the center of our existence since the late 19th century, and it still remains so today. our beloved Pondville Meeting House, at the first powwow, then and now. Like countless tribal nations throughout the United States today, the Herring Pond Wampanoag still faces the destructive impacts of colonialism. The colonial project of erasing Native identities and silencing Native accounts of our own histories. And they suggest that colonization of Native peoples in this region was inevitable and necessary. But we have never been silent, and we continue to resist colonization and colonialism. And along with other tribal nations in the United States today, we are immensely proud of our history of resilience as a Native people who has retained our deep connection to our homeland. In loving memory of our elders and the ancestors who have crossed over, there are so many more that we would love to share, and they all know that we honor them every single day. Thank you.
My people come from the land. My people come from the land. My people come from the land on which you stand, still fighting the white man, still fighting the white man. The path of the arrows narrow. My people living in peril with several flows. I'm armed wrestling with white devils, disheveled but never settled. These settlers ain't on my level. Give me bass, give me treble. I'm trouble but never tremble. Rekindle the seven council fires. Keepers of the flame, land of the burning fire. It's even in my name. I'm a simple sea jungle, it's how I rumble. I may stumble, but me, you got the Kisha, I never crumble. Survivors of genocide, the trauma's got me trapped. I used to keep it inside until I decide to rap. My ancestors ain't died for me to lie in my raps. Can't take it sitting down, instead I'm fighting back. Fuck your system, fuck your capitalism. They took the land, made us sick and gave us alcoholism. They took away your wisdom, they took away your health. We're gonna get it back, and we're gonna honor ourselves. My people come from the land. Free the land. My people come from the land. My people come from the land on which you stand, to find the white man, to find the white man. Mitra oya teki makoche eta hampi. 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 My tribe cannot survive as long as the settlers will thrive. Centuries on this land, they committed genocide. They don't feel the land, they kill the land. Try to kill the Indian and save the man. Send the slaughter, they poison water from Flint, Michigan to Standing Rock. The land is high, the land is hurt. I feel it too, I'm from the earth. My flesh and blood, the color of the dirt. I'm blessed enough to love my mother first. Talking Mother Earth, give me strength. Hair like the land and it grow at length. Well, peace, yeah, they cut our grandparents' braids. Took them to that boarding school where our grandparents stayed. Cut them off from the ways that their grandparents prayed. They're trying to build these pipelines over my grandparents' grave. There ain't no stopping this red light from blinding us. Ain't no stopping these problems from finding us. It's like I run with nowhere to go. My nation is a rosebud with nowhere to grow. My people come from the land. Free the land. My people come from the land. My people come from the land on which you stand, to find the white man, to find the white man. Mitra oya teki makoche eta hampi. Mitra oya teki makoche eta hampi.
everybody, this is Skyler Williams from 1492 LandBack Lane. We are in southwestern Ontario, just south of Hamilton, and we've been holding it down here now for 127 days. We've came in here on July 19th this year and have been met with heavy police violence, shooting rubber bullets at our people, tasering our people, dragging our people off the land on August 5th when they came in and raided the camp. Our people came out in a huge way that day. There was highways blocked, railways, and to make sure that we were able to get back on the land that we were fighting for. This development of 1,400 homes is going to be on the doorstep of our community. Everything that you can see from as far as the eye can see is going to be covered in concrete and asphalt in the name of progress. This is not for our people what progress looks like. Progress for our people looks like, the deer having a place to run, the animals, the trees, everything that we hold dear in Mother Nature is something that we hold dear to us. We want to make sure that we're able to have those things for the next 7 generations. Our people have fought long and hard. Every inch, every mile of every reservation across all of Turtle Island has been paid for in the blood and tears of our people. Many people have died so that we could have the land that we live on today. And who am I to spit on the graves of those of our forefathers who fought, who died so that we could have these lands that we hold dear to us today. And so we want to make sure that whenever we are making the stands that we have to make sure that we're able to give to our next 7 generations what was given to us. And so for the last 100 years, 200 years, we've seen every big city, every small town grow exponentially. The only places, the only cities, only towns, only communities that have gotten smaller are reserves. And so our community is one of those communities who's on 5% of what our reserve used to be. And so for us, that is unacceptable. And for the Canadian government here to continue to push and encroach on our lands. New legislation was just put into place to make sure that people were being encouraged to have these massive developments on unceded Haudenosaunee territory. And so when we come and we make these stands and we're able to stand together and amplify each other's voices the way that we are beginning to over the last few years, to lift each other up, to make sure that every single time our people make a stand, that we know that there's going to be people from everywhere coming to make sure that our voices are amplified in such a way. The governments of both Canada and the US have did everything they possibly could with tribal and band councils to divide our people. These forced governments that were pushed on our people to divide us, to make sure that we had this community of haves and have-nots, so that we could have those arguments and those divisions go on into the future. For us, this is absolutely unacceptable. And we are saying now that I don't care about all of those, centuries old divisions. Because we got good reason to be mad. We got good reason to be mad at each other. We've had a long time to foster those resentments. Right now, if we don't come together, all of those arguments that we've had over who has the say over the lands is all going to be for nothing, because we don't have any land left. And so when we make that call out to each other in our communities to say, like, I'm done with all of those divisions now, because our grandkids, our great-great-grandkids aren't going to have anything left. Our people need to make those stands and make those stands together. Because that's one thing, I don't care which family or which tribal or band council you belong or whatever, everybody understands that these are our lands. These are our lands, and if we make those stands and we make them together, that there is nothing that we can't do to amplify those voices to such a degree that there is no house of government that can't hear them. When we make those stands and we make those stands together, there is no quieting that voice any longer. And so I'm asking everybody across all of Turtle Island to make this stand with us, and we'll make that stand with you. Because we need to make this stand together for now and forever. Thank you very much, guys.
My name is Jennifer E. Cuffy Wilson. I'm a Shinnecock member. I'm also a member of the Graves Protection Warrior Society and Warriors of the Sunrise. We are out here this morning because we want New York State to drop the fucking lawsuit against my people, my nation. We need to be able to have some economic development, and they're stopping us from doing anything. Everything that we have tried to do, they have stopped. And now we've had it. We've had it. We're done. We're done with New York State. We're done with the town of Southampton. Cuomo, stop it. Letitia James, stop it.
We are from the Warriors of the Sunrise, which was established in the 70s, but it grew last year when our first monument was put up. And with the help of the women of the tribe, we had decided to do a bigger thing with the Warriors of the Sunrise. And right now we are on the highway to get New York State to drop the lawsuit against our monument. And we are having an encampment called Sovereignty Camp 2020. And we are working very hard to get New York State to drop this frivolous lawsuit against our nation.
I'm Rebecca Genia from the Shinnecock Indian Nation, Warriors of the Sunrise and Graves Protection Warrior Society. This is Kisha, my great-granddaughter. And we, again, are seeking justice for 380 years of maltreatment and demoralization. Indigenous people of Long Island have been taken advantage of for far too long. The town of Southampton apparently doesn't take us too seriously, or the state of New York doesn't either. So it's time to take a stand and make that stand for justice and for Indigenous people of Long Island and for our Mother Earth, who is being destroyed by the overdevelopment crisis in the town of Southampton. They're destroying our sacred waterways, which is called the Shinnecock Canal, and our bays and our oceans and streams and everything are being destroyed by greed and profit, and these billionaires that live on stolen land and build their mansions on stolen land of the Indigenous people. All of this we are seeking justice for, and I thank you for your time and your attention, and we're here for you too.
My name is Tila Troge. I'm a member of the Shinnecock Warriors of the Sunrise, and I'm so honored that we were invited to participate in the 50th anniversary of the National Day of Mourning. Just last month, I was able to visit Coles Hill and visit the monument to the National Day of Mourning, and just being there and seeing all the other monuments that were put up by the settlers to try to tell their version of events. I mean, they're just everywhere, right? The Founding Fathers Monument and the Plymouth Rock Monument and all of their other myths, monuments to those falsehoods. It just made me think about our Shinnecock Monument. And our monument, it's absolutely beautiful. It's 61 feet tall. And right now, unfortunately, it's half built. So I think of all the other monuments, and it's just not acceptable that something so beautiful and a testament to the continued existence of Shinnecock people would just be in this unfinished state. And it really speaks to the need for solidarity of all people to come together and support the fight against injustice anytime that they see it. And so we're so, again, proud and honored to stand with you on the recognition of the 50th day of the National Day of Mourning. Thank you.
Well, this song was written back in 1976, and there was a whole lot of activity going on across Indian country. After Wounded Knee happened, after the takeover of the BIA, the Menominee Warrior Society, and when AIM took over the Temple University in Philadelphia in 1976 for the 200th birthday of America. And in response to that, we here on Shinnecock, a few of us warriors who would become the Warriors of the Sunrise, said, well, we should take over our own land. We should take back West Woods. Well, how do you think the neighbors would feel about that? And this is what I thought they would say. Spread the news across the nation. Another Indian occupation, and it's going on in West Woods, Hampton Bays. Well, they're trying to get their land back after all these years. What's getting into Redskins these days? Well, their bones are in museums where people pays to see them. Now they want them back to put them in the ground. But why should we do it? There's really no point to it, since we pretend that Indians aren't around. Well, they're starting to fight back now. We didn't think they knew how. Well, all they knew about was getting drunk. Now they're talking casinos, gas stations, and big bingos. We never thought them Indians ever thunk. Well, you call the BIA to cart the savages away, 'cause they're starting to ruin the neighborhood. And everybody knows just how that story goes, that only dead Indians are good. So spread the news across the nation, another Indian occupation, and it's going on in West Woods, Hampton Bays. They think they'll get their land back after all these years. What crazy ideas Redskins have these days.
There is an ongoing epidemic of violence against Indigenous women in the US, Canada, Mexico, and elsewhere. In the US, at least 84% of Native women have experienced violence. While the government and police often say that this is due to the violence of Native men, in fact, it is non-Natives who commit the vast majority of this violence. Native American women are murdered at a rate of 10 times the national average. The rates in urban areas where many Native people live are also disproportionately high. This violence against Indigenous women and girls has deep roots in the invasion and colonization of Indigenous homelands and in white supremacy, marginalization, and poverty. Many Indigenous women are unable to access services needed to escape violence, such as culturally appropriate emergency shelters. Acts of violence against Indigenous women and girls may be motivated by racism or may be carried out in the expectation that society's indifference to the welfare and safety of these women will allow the perpetrators to escape justice. Some of you may have heard of an issue that Indigenous communities have been raising throughout North America, which is that of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits. That issue was named in Canada more than a dozen years ago. However, it's been the reality for Indigenous women throughout this hemisphere since the European invaders first arrived. Indigenous women and families have been trying to increase awareness of this issue by many means, ranging from campus awareness days to testifying at government hearings to bringing information about this issue to women's marches. Across Canada and the US, Indigenous women can often be seen marching wearing red shawls or scarves to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women, sometimes holding red dresses aloft. When talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, it can be difficult to come up with enough statistics, since Indigenous people are often not counted or are undercounted. It's hard to give exact figures for the magnitude of the problem because there were no centralized databases in the US or Canada. Even when figures are available, they may not include Indigenous Two-Spirit people, but the numbers run into the several thousands at the least. In Canada, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit women are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than other women. Indigenous women there believe there are likely over 7,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada, but do not have an exact number. We do know that Indigenous women there are 4.3% of the population, but at least 16% of those murdered. In Manitoba, they are half of the murdered women. The police often fail to investigate adequately, and many believe that the police themselves are sometimes the culprits. Many Indigenous youth in cities such as Winnipeg are at particular risk for violence because of the conditions of being removed from their families and stuck into a dangerous and broken foster care system. In the 1990s, it became clear that Mexican women in this Ciudad Juarez and El Paso area were being murdered in large numbers, many of them teens. The authorities did not care. Femicide, the killing of women, is a huge issue throughout what is now called Latin America, and is all too common against Indigenous women who are trying to protect their lands and water. The violence that Indigenous women experience knows no borders. Violence against Indigenous women is rampant at so-called man camps that pop up to house the short-term workers in areas where there is intense resource extraction activity, such as at oil pipeline sites, fracking, mining, etc. As a result, the number of sexual assault, domestic violence, and sex trafficking incidents in North Dakota tripled since 2008 because of all the man camps that sprang up there along the Bakken Formation. The ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits is also interrelated with the violence being enacted right now against migrant families, many of them Indigenous, coming from Honduras, Mexico, and other countries. Women and Two-Spirits are especially endangered. Some of the reforms that have been proposed and enacted will certainly help, but they will not entirely solve the crisis. That is because violence against women and Two-Spirit people is a hallmark feature of colonialism in the Americas, started by Christopher Columbus and his men. This violence is a mechanism of domination and oppression. It is intended to terrorize, disrupt, and demoralize Indigenous populations.
Compañeras, compañeros, les saludamos desde nuestras tierras ancestrales.
The never-ending genocidal bloodshed against our ancestral peoples cries with thirst for justice. Thank you for the many years that you welcome us to be part of National Day of Mourning, but not this 2020. Please know that our spokesperson has transitioned in this struggle. Thank you for sharing the ceremony with you all in the beautiful ancestral Wampanoag homeland. For hundreds of years, we have been standing up fighting the colonizers. Demanding justice, always standing up. As this day arrives, we continue to fight the racism, looting, and impunity that prevails against our peoples. We continue to hear the sounds of the bullets and murderous aggression. We still hear the empty, oppressive words of the Christian groups. We hear the sounds of the trains, airplanes dropping bombs and toxic chemicals. And we still stand up, fighting the hurricanes, earthquakes of the modern civilized colonizers. Our sisters and brothers taking refuge in the jungle, the mountains, in the cities, and fleeing to other countries to save their lives. Still, the dew of the night accompanies us looking for our missing relatives. We do not forget, we do not kneel, we are standing up against corrupt governments that insist with their ethnic cleansing and robbing us, the indigenous peoples, of our ancestral territories. Natural resources, destroying our sacred way of life and sacred sites. Our spilled blood will not be forgotten. It nourishes Mother Earth. But the ignorant colonizers don't see that we are seeds. Today, our hearts are strengthened. Our sadness is transformed into indignation, struggle, and resistance for our sovereignty. Our cry for justice will be heard in every corner of the world. The only crime our massacred and disappeared sisters and brothers was and is to defend our ancestral territories, to have the sustenance to nourish our peoples and create our own history. Our voices and fight continue to take more steps. That is why today we give our words to you here, and we will continue fighting, demanding justice. And as long as one person is dead, no one stays alive. Let us all die, even slowly, until we destroy this racist and unjust colonizing system. No one will come to rescue us. We only have us. Self-organization. In the jungle, the mountains, the cities, communities, in schools, at work.
From the ancestral Maya territories, Consejo de Ancianos, los pueblos unidos jamás serán vencidos.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. Que cantar, que vamos a triunfar.
Kwe ni nadalwisi Kukuwes Wowkis Ahwigi Mi'kma'ki. My colonial name is Madonna Bernard, and I live here in Mi'kmaq territory. People wanted to know what was going on down in Saulnayville, Nova Scotia, with all the fishing disputes and our treaty rights and stuff like that. When I was down there, it was totally disgusting what the commercial fishermen were doing to our people, and what DFO and government were not doing, and the cops were not stopping any of the commercial fishermen from doing what they were doing. It was just totally disgusting what you've seen when you would see the cops down there, and they were pretty much siding with the commercial fishermen. The DFO hauling up our traps, our fishermen traps. I can only speak from me personally, from when I was down there. I do not speak on behalf of our nation, but it's scary what's happening, because this is all unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq. And not once have we ceded our territory. Now, it's all unceded territory. It's disgusting what these fishermen are doing. Sorry. And it's disgusting what's happening to basically our children's futures. And the government has to be accountable for this. Canada is nothing but a corporation. Canada is a corporation, and I will not stop saying that. Our treaty rights are law. Our treaty rights are our law. We follow our laws. We don't follow Canadian laws. And I'm scared for future generations. This is why I'm down there. I was down there doing what I can, because I...
Habitakyapi, Nape Chuzapi, Chante Washte. I greet everyone with a traditional Lakota greeting, an open heart, and a handshake to all of our brothers, sisters, and relatives across the world who are tuning in to this year's National Day of Mourning. There's something about the weather. Last year, bushfires in Australia scorched more than 46 million acres, an area larger than Hungary and Portugal combined. Flames shot nearly half a mile in the air, killing 34 humans and more than 1 billion animals. In the United States, 8.2 million acres burned, and killing 37 people and displacing countless others. Swarms of locusts darkened the sky in parts of East Africa and West Asia, devouring plants and fruits as they tore through the land, leaving hardly a scrap of green. A single living swarm in Kenya amassed the size 3 times larger than New York City. Tens of millions today face increased food insecurity. But the horsemen of the apocalypse can't ride alone without a plague. The coronavirus pandemic swept the planet, sharpening 2 competing visions of humanity, one based on science and caretaking, and the other on pure make-believe. The most powerful nation in the world chose the latter. And across the United States, Black, brown, Indigenous, migrants, and poor people in general have bore the brunt of the virus. Even tepid social reforms like universal health care, largely a reality for most of the nations in the global north, was far off the table. Instead, hundreds of thousands of people needlessly died, oftentimes alone, without access to life-saving medications or treatments available to the super rich. A large part of humanity perished, taking a little piece of our hearts with them, including some of my own family back home in South Dakota. Others who either survived the virus symptoms or had lost their jobs or homes, or all three, were left to fend for themselves as billionaires raked in record earnings. In places like the Navajo Nation, rates of infection were exacerbated by centuries of resource colonialism. While its rivers have been diverted to water golf courses in Phoenix and its mesas mined for coal to power the Southwest, about 30% of its population lives without running water, and 10% live without electricity. Grandmothers who have hauled water for 90 years live next to fracking rigs that pump millions of gallons of fresh water into the ground to crack it open during the fracking process, destroying both the land and the water. This is in the desert landscape where water is especially scarce and considerably sacred. In Indian country, tribes that took serious the science closed their borders and set up emergency health protections. Yet the make-believe approach won over many. Once it was revealed that the virus disproportionately impacted non-white communities, heavily armed men, most of whom were white, stormed state capitals, demanding haircuts and the reopening of restaurants. The virus intensified and spread, and with it came the toxic atmosphere of cynicism and hatred. Coronavirus, as we know as Indigenous people, is like climate change. The most advanced capitalist countries were warned about both threats far in advance. They had access to the best science and experts, and did nothing. U.S. officials cynically renamed fossil fuels emitted into the atmosphere molecules of freedom. And U.S. leaders blamed the coronavirus's massive body count not on an inhumane for-profit healthcare system, but on a foreign country. China, because of its socialized healthcare system, similar in Cuba and Vietnam, swiftly and all but eliminated the threat of the virus within a matter of months as it continued to spread elsewhere. Despite the massive death and destruction, a viable alternative within mainstream North American politics here in Turtle Island didn't coalesce. 2020 has become one of the hottest years on record. So as we look back in this last year, we can look at the defeats as well as the triumphs. After the military forced Evo Morales from office, the country's first Indigenous president gave a speech. "We will come back," he said, quoting the 18th century Indigenous resistance leader, "and we will be millions," as Tupac Katari said. Evo Morales has since returned. With him, the election of Luis Arce as president and David Chequahuanca as vice president, the Indigenous revolution continues in Bolivia. And not only had the coup government, with the support of the United States, overthrown the administration, they also tried to crush the project for decolonization it represented. Some have called it a lithium coup, which is partly true, and indeed, countries like Bolivia possess large supplies of lithium needed for the so-called green energy transition that the capitalist first world countries are vying for in this particular moment of climate catastrophe. However, the lithium coup is part of a longer kind of tradition of knocking in line countries, especially those of the global south, who fall out of line with the global imperialist order, who refuse to be sites of extraction, but who also take their own path for social and economic development. As a member of the Red Nation, an Indigenous liberation organization founded in 2014 here in Tiwa territory, as well as in Dinétah, or the Navajo Nation, we take inspiration from our comrades and relatives in Bolivia. Specifically, we take inspiration from the 2010 People's Accords that were drafted in Cochabamba, Bolivia, a large part of the Proceso de Cambio, the process of change. The Accords spell out principles of ecofeminism, eco-socialism, and anti-imperialism infused with traditional Indigenous ecological knowledge. And that's the spirit of the document that we helped create, the Red Deal, a movement document born of Indigenous resistance and decolonial struggle. The weather is changing, and so too are the stakes, and everyone is feeling the temperatures rise. And so for Indigenous people, we understand that not only is it important to put Indigenous people in charge of any climate justice movement, it is to understand that we as Indigenous people are protecting the very things that sustain life on this planet: clean air, clean water, and clean land. A UN report recently found that Indigenous people, although they are only 5% of the world's population, protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. At the same time, we still control about, or still caretake, I should say, and steward about 1/4 of the world's landmass. In these places where indigenous stewardship is prevalent, environmental desecration and destruction is less so. These include places where I'm from, such as the Missouri River Basin, one of the longest waterways in the entire world. Recently, we have opposed oil pipeline construction from the Dakota Access Pipeline to the Keystone XL pipeline from the Great Sioux Nation of the Oceti-Sakowin. Or it can include places that are the lungs of the planet, such as the Amazon rainforest, places facing existential threat of deforestation, mining, capitalist development, and exploitation. And so as we continue the struggle as indigenous people, as water protectors, as land defenders, who are demanding things such as land back, we also have to look to the overwhelming presence of the U.S. military, not only on Indian lands or indigenous lands here in North America, but the way that the U.S. military has spread itself across the world, not only becoming the #1 purveyor of violence in the world, but also becoming the #1 polluter of carbon emissions in the world as well. The U.S. military is the world's largest institutional consumer of oil and correspondingly the single largest producer of greenhouse gases in the world. And in any given year, the U.S. military pumps more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than some industrialized countries. And in fact, in 2017, the Pentagon's total greenhouse gas emissions were greater than greenhouse gas emissions of entire countries, such as Sweden, Denmark, and Portugal. This includes the massive, violent, as well as expensive carbon footprint of more than 800 military installations throughout the globe, many of them encircling countries that are deemed enemies of the United States, while also militarizing indigenous communities and lands and territories, such as those in the Pacific, including places like Guam or Hawaii. And the U.S. military is not only deeply intertwined with the fossil fuel industry. We know that global wars in the last 20 years have been about securing the oil supply of the remaining oil supply of the world to, as Obama put it during his administration, eke out energy independence, or as Trump put it in his administration, to eke out U.S. energy dominance over the world. And so we understand that in this current moment, that we are faced with two choices: decolonization or extinction. And we encourage people to join us as the Red Nation and continue to support organizations such as the United American Indians of New England and the National Day of Mourning. And the focus, however, in the current LandBack movement can't just be subscribed or circumscribed to what is considered the domestic territory of the United States. Demilitarization and decarbonization also means land back to the nations and territories occupied by one of the more than 800 overseas military bases that violate the sovereignty of nations. Guantanamo Bay must be restored back to Cuba. Okinawa, Korea, Guam, Hawaii, the Philippines, Iraq, Egypt, Afghanistan, Puerto Rico, El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, Palestine, and so many other places the U.S. occupies, or in the case of Palestine, through its own proxies, such as the State of Israel. And so if we do not stop the continued militarization of the globe and demand its decolonization or extinction, the United States will continue to hold the future of the planet hostage. Thank you so much for listening to me.
America doesn't exist. It's an idea that men have obsessed over since 1776, an excuse we use to manifest a reality that destroyed the destiny of all Native people. We used to be 100% of the population and today are less than 1%, all because man forgot to separate fact from his fabrication, because once we believe America is real, we believe we have a reason to kill, a reason to steal. Do you remember what has happened ever since we dreamed up this illusion, this country, this church, and this state? Trail of Tears, 1830. Look on the $20 bill and you'll see Andrew Jackson, the man who ordered the forced expulsion of 15,000 Cherokee from their homeland, pregnant women, their children, and the elderly forced to walk from Georgia to Oklahoma, Wounded Knee Massacre. U.S. cavalry descends on a Lakota camp with 530 women and children, and with America in their minds and red and white stripes blinding their sight, they sunk bullets into the chests of children, trampled women with their horses, and left 200 Lakota dead in the snow. 1887, American bayonets forced a constitution on Hawaii, an illegal parchment declaration stripping the kingdom of its power so money could be made from its land and people. And this is how our beloved country was founded. You see, America doesn't exist. It's a psychological sickness we catch with years of exposure to public schools and baseball games, raising hands to our hearts for a fairy tale that America is anything more than a word. We put labels on the land and draw imaginary lines in the sand, but it's a tragedy when humanity forgets to separate fact from fabrication, projecting our imagination onto sacred mountains and ancient continents. Ever since I was a child, I was told that I lived in America. And then one day I realized that America lives in me, in my mind. But today we drop our weapons. Today we stop the cycle. Today we unite with every plant and animal in this world to remember that humanity is real. A beating heart is real. The earth beneath us is real. But America is a thought that has turned brothers into contenders, histories into myths, entire cultures into forgotten languages, and the free mind into a society deceived. So please do not call me American. Do not even call me Native American. Please call me human. And please do not call this land America. If you listen carefully, she will tell you her true name as the night hawks dive at twilight, as the wolves howl at moonlight, as the waterfalls rage cascading, as the avalanches fracture breaking. She will tell you her true name with earthquakes that split states and break fences to remind you that she does not belong to you, but that we belong to her.
Sengitamu uwi agendi totse na o te wa kawe kweri omu heraki towa unmu. My Tewa name is Totse. I am from Okewinge and Ogapoge, occupied Santa Fe. My name in English is Elena Ortiz, and I am the co-chair of the Red Nation. The Red Nation formed in 2014. We are a coalition of Native and non-Native activists, educators, students, and community organizers advocating Native liberation. We formed to address the marginalization and invisibility of Native struggles within mainstream social justice organizing, and to foreground the targeted destruction and violence towards Native life and land. We are Indigenous revolutionaries. We are comrades and relatives first and foremost. We practice radical democracy and compassion for all relatives. Despite differences in organizational role or affiliation, we are equals in struggle. We are anti-capitalist and anti-colonial. We are Indigenous feminists who believe in radical relationality. We do not seek a milder form of capitalism or colonialism. We demand an entirely new system premised on peace, cooperation, and justice. For our earth and relatives to live, capitalism and colonialism must die. We belong to long traditions of Indigenous resistance. We claim our rightful place among all freedom fighters around the world. We are not the first, nor will we be the last. We are the ancestors from the before and the already forthcoming. By carrying this history forward, we actively create the world in which we want to live. In the last 2 years, the Red Nation has grown exponentially. There are now freedom councils, what we call our chapters, on the West Coast, in the Great Lakes region, Hesapa, and the East Coast. Our founding chapter in Albuquerque now encompasses the entire Southwest. Our freedom councils work within their own communities around issues such as water and land protection, resource extraction, and missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. We understand that resource extraction and the man camps are the main contributors to the abuse and murder of our Femme and Two-Spirit relatives. We support communities in their fight to stop all resource extraction on Mother Earth. The Hesapa Freedom Council has been actively supporting the Mini-Luzahan camp in Oceti-Sakowin territory. The East Coast chapter is supporting the Shinnecock Warriors of the Sunrise Camp. The Southwest Freedom Council has spent the months of the pandemic distributing PPE and other necessities to our unsheltered and other relatives in Albuquerque and beyond. They have been doing weekly feeds at the Albuquerque office when it is safe to do so. After the murder of George Floyd and the mobilization of activists all over the country, we also began to make demands on our own homelands. We joined together with our Black and African relatives in their struggle, and they joined with us in ours. In occupied Santa Fe, we joined forces with our Chicana relatives to demand that the statue of the murdering conquistador Don Juan de Oñate was removed from traditional Tewa homelands. We also demanded the removal of conquistador Don Diego de Vargas from Ogapoge occupied Santa Fe. The mayor did remove the statue of de Vargas, but the promise to remove the racist obelisk from the center of the plaza stalled. On June 18th, we held a rally on the plaza with our Indigenous relatives, a coalition of women, Indigenous women, during which the mayor of Santa Fe, Ogapoge, promised to remove that racist obelisk from the center of the plaza. He did not fulfill that promise to remove the obelisk, so on Indigenous Peoples Day, we assisted the government of occupied Santa Fe in removing the racist obelisk. Because of this action, which was organized by a coalition of groups in northern New Mexico, many of our relatives, Indigenous women and white allies, are facing federal charges. We are asking for support for these relatives, both white allies and Indigenous women. You can find the link to assist with donations on the Red Nation website. In addition to our activism in the streets and our struggles to have racist memorials and monuments removed, we also have 2 podcasts, the Red Nation podcast and the Red Power Hour, which you can access wherever you get your podcast. The Patreon account associated with these podcasts help us donate supplies and money to not only the Oceti-Sakowin, but our relatives in Tono Oram and Kumeyaay territory as they fight the border wall that is planned through their territories. We invite all people who struggle for Indigenous liberation and liberation for all to join us at the Red Nation. We especially invite all of our Indigenous and Black Indigenous relatives to join us in struggle. You can read all about our work, what we do, what we stand for, who we are, on therednation.org. Again, in struggle, in blessings, and gratitude for all of our relatives. My name is Elena Ortiz Totse, coming at you from occupied Santa Fe, Ogapoge. Thank you all, and may we find peace in the coming year.
Tamu, ubi akin de Nanapovi Atewa Kawe Kwedi Omu Hira Ke Tawa Aumu. My name is Savannah Ortiz. I'm from Okewinge Pueblo. My Tewa name is Nanapovi. I am coming to you from occupied Santa Fe to read a poem. The idea for this poem came while I was assisting in building an altar, which was a reaction to the current civil rights movement that started with the death of George Floyd. It's a place to honor our Black Indigenous people of color, as well as a place to feel safe from what's going on in the world, because we don't know really what's going on. It's very unpredictable, but this is something that you can find comfort in. And this poem came when we were putting the mud to put the adobe together, and I started moving my hands, messing with the mud, waiting for my turn to put the mud. And one of my friends mentioned that it looked like I was making tortillas. And I looked down and I realized that I was doing that motion. And so this poem is called Muscle Memory. Something about the feeling of the earth seeping through scarred hands feels familiar. Standing still amongst memories swirling as if I'd been standing for 1,000 years. The whisper of the word wind tells my heart to hurt. The flowering plants tell my muscles to ache, as if I'd been climbing, running, laughing. The act of playing in earth becomes pressing tortillas. The act of singing in the car becomes prayer. The repetition of coming into this place brings silhouettes of memories of youth, echoes of voices long forgotten with time. The essence of a friend left from this world, the voice that remains in trees left behind. The mark of youth and innocence lingering, reminders of a time that no longer exists. Silhouettes of a you that you no longer inhabit, but the memory of the things you did remains. It lives within the person you are now and in this place, because you remember how to live as you did once before, and you remember what it was to be one with the land. Thank you.
Ha, Prepahana Simachiapi. Hohoshu Oyanke Lakota Oyate Ematahaksto. Hello, my name is Prepohanis. I come from the Cheyenne River Sioux people and am the current National Native American AIDS Prevention Center's Awareness Ambassador. And welcome to my cyber teepee. It's a privilege and honor to be here with you today and to get to speak a little bit about the Two-Spirit identity. We are thriving and not just surviving in Indian country. It is important to understand and address the unmet human needs in Indian country, like lack of employment, lack of health care or proper access to health care, substance challenges, mental health challenges. I think we all have a gift, we all have a reason and a purpose for being here, and each of us has those special gifts to share with others. And it's in this way, I think, the Two-Spirit identity, when colonization happened, it was one of the they were one of the peoples that got taken out of that equation through the genocidal practices of only having a couple of genders, when there was much gender fluidity among the Americas, among different nations, tribal nations. And so on this day, I just would like to extend respect to the past and respect to the present Two-Spirit community and all the work that they're doing. And I look forward to the future and seeing what that's going to look like for our Two-Spirit peoples and where the movement is going to be at that time. So thank you so much for having me here today and getting just to share a few words with you and take up a little bit of space. But I appreciate it, and everybody take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Khaled Barakat. I am a Palestinian writer, activist,
This is my message and salute of solidarity to the National Day of Mourning taking place in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I am speaking to you today from the unceded Coast Salish territory in Canada. Your continued commemoration of the National Day of Mourning for 50 years expresses your commitment, resilience, and ongoing struggle to settler colonialism. Palestinians across the land of Palestine and in outside, in exile, in diaspora, also understand the type of great challenges facing the struggle of indigenous people in North America and around the world. As your people fought for centuries against colonization and continue to do so, my people in Palestine have also been engaged in a long march for justice and freedom, for liberation and equality, for sovereignty and self-determination and return to the land, to be free in our land. Today, as we see the iron heels of capitalism and of imperialism across the world, revealing their true face and their hidden one, Trump and Biden, but we see their goals are the same. How many times do colonizers promise us peace? How many times have they broken their promises? How many times did they sign treaties and retreat from it? How many times have they lied, deceived, and broken their commitments? The lesson of history that we, the indigenous native people of the South, of the North, must draw is to never trust capitalists. The only way that we can gain our rights and achieve our liberation is when we are victorious as people, as working people, poor people, popular classes, regardless of our color, language, nationality, and so on. We, the native people and nations of the world, we understand the meaning of land, that land has a deep value far beyond the concept of property and ownership. Our great Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish wrote in his masterpiece, The Speech of the Red Indians, "Tamer of horses, teach us horse. To ask forgiveness of nature's soul for the way you've treated our trees. Oh, sister tree, look how they tortured you, the way they tortured me. Never ask forgiveness for the woodcutter whose axe felled both your mother and mine." So we know that with the great challenges facing our struggle today, we cannot do it alone. This must compel us to build the widest popular alliance and connect our struggles. For your fight is our fight, and your battle is our battle. Your liberation is our liberation. These are not just mere words. The enemies who colonized Palestine are the same forces who colonized your land, and they are united. Your struggle has been an inspiration for not only Palestinians, but for people all around the world, because you have been engaged in a fight for centuries, the same as your brothers and sisters in the Black Liberation Movement, your and our natural ally in this struggle. I have no doubt in my mind that our people one day will be victorious. The distance between now and victory is revolution. Long live the struggle of indigenous liberation. Long live international solidarity. Long live Palestine.
On behalf of the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, or IPM-SDL,
I convey our warmest solidarity greetings with the United American Indians of New England in your commemoration of the National Day of Mourning. The International IPM-STL is a global platform of indigenous communities, organizations, and advocates working for the recognition of indigenous peoples' rights to land and self-determination. I am Beverly Longid, the Global Coordinator of the International IPM-STL. I am an Igorot, Indigenous Peoples of the Cordillera in the Philippines, belonging to the Kankanaey and Bontoc peoples. The International IPM-STL is one with our Native American brothers and sisters and all indigenous communities that speak about the violent history of colonization, genocide, and oppression suffered at the hands of European colonizers. The centuries of suffering of the indigenous peoples continue at the hands of the U.S. government. They remain silent, exploited, abused, and some are corralled in reservations which strip them of their freedom, livelihood, and development. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, they remain threatened with the government's neglect of their basic health and social services. Racism and discrimination has reached new heights with more incarceration, criminalization, harassments, and killings with impunity in the U.S. and across the globe. This historical injustice, worsened by systemic revisionism of Native Americans' history and disinformation, challenges everyone to stand up and speak truth to power. And together with the struggles of other peoples of color, the workers, migrants, and other sectors, marginalized groups and communities, let this day of mourning grow into a movement declaring enough is enough. It is time to reclaim our history, our lands, and our right to self-determination. The time of pandemic is a time to protest. Today's commemoration is a declaration of our resistance. In honor of our ancestors and heroes, let us commit to continue and strengthen our solidarity and struggle. Long live the indigenous peoples, long live international solidarity.
Taigwe tituno kena da tiaono. Diri mukaro aguibana. Kasike yukayeke guainia kena boriken taino daka. Greetings, sisters and brothers. I'm Mukaro Aguibana. I'm a community leader from the Guainia Taino tribe, and my family lineage comes from the island of Boriken, which today many people know as Puerto Rico. I wanted to begin my brief presentation sharing a few words in my Taino language, which is not English or Spanish or any other colonial language. I have the great honor to share a message of solidarity on behalf of the Guainia Taino tribe and the United Confederation of Taino people. You know, as historic first contact indigenous peoples, we Taino can empathize with the northeastern indigenous nations during this time. As you know, we're just coming out of the month of October, and while we're seeing some incremental progress across the country, the settler state still generally is celebrating white supremacy, slavery, religious intolerance, gender violence, colonialism, and genocide via the Columbus Day holiday. However, despite this historic injustice, we indigenous peoples are still here. We remain steadfast in our fight against oppression and in defense of our basic human rights, not only for our present, but for our future generations. So it's especially important for us to remain vigilant in these uncertain times with the rise of fascism, the climate crisis, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's continue to be here for each other the best way that we can and find creative ways to work together so that we can help not only our people, but the planet survive and thrive well into the future. In closing, I say, Masinato Kena Kakona, peace and blessings to the organizers, to the local indigenous nations, and to all those who are supporting this historic event today. Hahom, thank you.
Mataku yepi. Chante weste na pe chuzapi, wakian wanata na machiapi. Yan waslaha mataha. Ate wayagi Charles Rimley, ina wayagi Donna Harrison. Wana Seattle Elwati. Hello, my relatives. My English name is Matt Rimley. My Lakota name is Wakian Waanatan. My parents are Charles Rimley and Donna Harrison. And I'm currently living out here in Coast Salish territory of Seattle. And good feelings in my heart. Extend a hand out to each and every one of you, my relatives who for many, many decades have been on the front line sharing that message of a day of mourning, to bring that message of genocide, to remind people of what these colonizers have done to your relations, to your peoples, that then spread out to all our tribes across the land. So my heart is with each and every one of you, and very, very extremely grateful for again the many decades and really doing that decolonizing work to expose the lies and the myths surrounding this holiday. You know, we did a similar out here in Seattle to try to bring a decolonizing message to that day, Columbus Day, and rename that to Indigenous Peoples Day. So out here in Seattle, all the way across the Makoche Washte, the good land, you know, we stand in solidarity with you and to celebrate or give recognition for that day of mourning and solidarity with all our East Coast relatives and tribes. So thank you for standing. Thank you for bringing that message. Thank you for being that light for not only your tribes, our tribes, as Lakota people, Coast Salish tribes, but really Indigenous peoples around the world who continue to fight against these messages of ignorance from our various colonizers. So out here, we've been fighting a lot on the expansion of various fossil fuel projects. The West Coast has become kind of a primary target for a lot of the exporting of these fossil fuels. So we're kind of standing on the front lines of trying to stop many of these fossil fuel projects from reaching our ports. And one of the messages that we share is to target them financial institutions, them banks, those insurance companies, because they're the ones who are behind these corporations. They're the ones that are financing, funding, or insuring these various fracking projects, tar sands projects, these pipelines, mining, stuff like that. They're the hands behind it, and they're the hands behind profiting from it. And they are the ones who are profiting from this climate crisis. So we take these messages and do some little bit of direct action against these banks and try to get folks, cities, individuals, whomever, tribes, pull your money out of these banks, out of these financial institutions, and go to these insurance companies and demand that they not underwrite these different projects that are desecrating our tribal homelands. One of the other messages that we're really trying to push for these different institutions and governments is that they need to be adopting free, prior, and informed consent policies, that these corporations, companies, governments, they need to be engaging with our tribal nations and not put ramming through these projects that negatively impact our lands, our air, our water, and our future generations. So just want to take a few minutes here to let folks know on the other coast, what we've been engaged in out here in the West. We spend several months every summer now for the past few years under a cloud of smoke. This climate crisis is real, and our tribal nations and communities are experiencing it firsthand. So we send a little solidarity, a little message of what we are experiencing out here, a little bit of messaging about targeting those financial institutions, and absolutely we want to send a message of solidarity to each and every one of you. Blehe chiapo, be brave, my relatives. Mitakwe oyasin.
Don't kill the river. What she done to you? Let her live, let her breathe, let her be, let her waters flow through. Don't kill the river. What's it gonna take? She's dying, she's suffering, suffocating every cent that you make. Don't kill the river. Can't you hear her sing? Just listen to the sound of her voice as it moves on the wind. Don't kill the river. Hear what she has to say. Let her live, let her breathe, let her see another day. Everyone's fighting for their piece of the pie. One planet, one chance, don't let her die. Protect, not destroy. Don't kill the river. What she done to you? Let her live, let her breathe, let her be, let her waters flow through. Don't kill the river. What's it gonna take? She's dying, she's suffering, suffocating every cent that you make. Everyone's fighting for their piece of the pie. One planet, one chance, don't let her die. Protect, not destroy. Don't kill the river. Don't kill the river. Don't kill the river.
We have lost many lives. We have lost everything that is healthy, that was healthy on the water system. from the Michikamak in Cross Lake, Manitoba, northern Manitoba in Canada. We have experienced so much difficulty with hydro developments that are being built around our territory. We have lost many lives. We have lost everything that is healthy, that was healthy on the water system. Our children and grandchildren who do love swimming use the water system for swimming, even though some of us do not allow them to go there, they still do anyway. And they get scabs, rashes from the water system. Regardless though, with the showering and bathing, they still do get rashes and scabs. When our children get out of the water, when our grandchildren get out of the water, you can smell the unbearable odor on them. And as standing by the river system, you can smell the unbearable odor, and you cannot see through the water as we did when we were children. Remembering and reminiscing back to my days of my childhood, I used to go with my grandfather lifting his nets. When we went swimming, we saw fish underwater from afar, and we saw the glittering light of the sun on them. It was beautiful, very pristine. And when we played out by the lake swimming in the summertime, we ate from berries. We ate things that were edible in the water system. Today we cannot do that. Berries grew along the river system, many different kinds. And that's where we ate from when we were eating, when we were playing out by the lake swimming. That is all gone. There is some very little tiny dots, practically dots of those berries that we enjoyed and loved when we were children. Our water is so unhealthy. We cannot drink the water. We can, but it has to be treated. And when the water is being treated, you can smell the chemicals as you drink the water. We have E. coli on our northern Manitoba river systems. We lost a lot of people while doing what they love to do, hunting, fishing, trapping, gathering medicines. We have lost a lot of medicines that we used for our health, for our well-being when the water was clean, before Manitoba Hydro came and destroyed it. Our species that we ate had medicinal value on them. The sturgeon that is close to extinction now had a medicinal value of opening up arteries to the heart. And when all these foods are gone, the healthy nutrition is gone, we lost many people through diabetes, heart attacks, cancer. Yet, when we want to do something of research on these things, we can't, because we don't have the resources, financial resources to do it. Many people died in the river system in northern Manitoba. In our area, there's approximately 6 people who died, one who fell through hanging ice and into the river. People navigating rapids drown. People navigating the river system through slush die out there. So there are many hurting things, hurting problems, issues caused by Manitoba Hydro projects. We pay the price. Yes, the price of how much the hydro bills are extravagantly high, but we pay the price of losing our loved ones, losing our spiritual connection to the land, water that we dearly love, a place where our Creator put us to survive, and yet a corporation and the governments take that away from us through their policies. Blessings to everyone out there. We hear your story and you hear ours, and every one of them are not good for anybody here on earth. Ekusi, mantukay sa nimikwa.
And we try to send a message to the people here in the United States that they need to understand when your governments present you the energy and then calling it clean and green energy and not knowing what's going on back in the Canada. It's where you need to find out the truth. What is clean energy? What is green energy? What does it do to the United States? It's a possibility you look at it as a clean and green energy because you're not destroying lands of indigenous people here in regards to a hydro dam. As a matter of fact, what I saw in some of days here, some of the dams are being removed. And I wish we can do that back home, but as long as United States keep buying hydropower from either Manitoba Hydro or from Quebec Hydro, we pay the price, you know. And when we pay the price, I said, we are the ones who actually see that live in those devastated lands and waters. Right. And our people, for so many years, thousands of years, have lived off the land, free. You know, like they just go out there and do what they can do. But you take a look at the dams that are being built on our waters and our traditional lands. Your rights as a treaty rights or as indigenous rights or as sovereign rights to these particular areas, these particular lands, when you see being destroyed, you see your life as Pimitsikamak, okay, as a nation itself, living in this horrible place where dams are being built. Where I live, there's about 8 dams right across the Nelson River. And every day, every week, every month and years, every second, land falls to the water and creates a very horrific contamination of water, which we now are trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this. So the message we're trying to get toward the United States is basically don't buy hydro energy, because all this is the same thing as tar sands. It's just the same thing as fossil fuels, okay? Because they're not clean. Graves are being flooded, and some of them have eroded out of the graves, and we can find skulls and bones of our ancestors underwater. And we have to move them up a little higher to the ground so they won't be exposed to fluctuations of the water. And it's basically at the same time, it's horrific for elders to see our bones scattered along the shorelines of our ancestors. And it's basically another way of destroying the history of people. Okay? By flooding the historical places where they have been. The other things, when they find artifacts about our people, and then when we try to claim them, those are our people, those are ancestors' artifacts. But the province comes around and said, no, it's the property of the province. And I said to myself, well, was the province here 2,000 years ago to be the property of the province? And he said, no. But then who is the owner of those artifacts that they could build their own museum so they could teach their kids where we come from as people, as humans, or as Inahewak or Pipitsikamak people. That's who we are. That's another message we're trying to deliver to the United States, as to understand what corridors they're going to be building across to get hydropower from Quebec or hydropower from Manitoba Hydro. It is very important that they understand that it's not clean. It kills people. Our people have died out there exercising their right to hunt and fish. About 8 cases of people have died out there. For example, my brother and my stepbrother have died out there exercising their rights to able to understand, to able to go hunt, And for people here in the United States, between New York and Boston, need to understand that buying this power is basically participating in the act of cultural genocide of our people without having to understand what those issues back there in the shadows of these mega dams.
Hi, my name is Denise Cole. I'm a land protector in Goose Bay, Labrador of mixed Inuit descent. I'm really honored that I've been given this opportunity to show solidarity and to speak to all of you today. It's hard to imagine this has been 50 years to commemorate the Day of Mourning. And what's known as a Thanksgiving, as a tradition for colonizers, really has been the story that too many of us know in Indigenous communities. And it's the story of being taken from, being treated less than, and losing land and culture and lives and language. So we try to think of all of the things that we mourn. I also think of the strength and the resiliency and how we've grown and how we continue, and how I know that our ancestors are watching and that they're proud of the stands that we're taking. And I know the next generations are going to benefit from the work that we are doing. Here in Goose Bay, Labrador, these are the traditional lands of the Inuit and the Innu. And they've been colonized as well. And there's many stories of resettlement and residential schools, and loss of language, and loss of culture, and loss of way of life. And we're still dealing with the repercussions from those losses. There's much to mourn. So healing journeys are happening. They're happening in these lands, and in your lands, and right across the globe. Mother Earth is bringing us together, I believe. We have major threats to water here in Labrador. Mega dams being built on our rivers. Most recently, the one just upstream, just by 30 kilometers, just a few miles upstream from where I live, is Muskrat Falls. And this mega dam has just wreaked havoc in many ways by things such as the loss of traditional food web that's been contaminated by methyl mercury. There's also instability issues that put us at risk downstream of potential flooding and even loss of life. I think a big thing that has spoken to many of us, and certainly has been something that I've become very aware of being involved as a land protector and in this movement of protection of land, water, lives, and culture, is that most of these colonized governments do not recognize, nor do they want to recognize, things like the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. And there's so many violations that are happening in order for corporations, companies, and governments to continue the land grabs and to continue the resource extraction and exploitation of our people, and to keep us in a place of deficit so that we are never truly nations of our own standing again. So I hope with actions like what you're doing there, what we're doing here, bring us together in a collective circle of protection, that Mother Earth continues to bond us and to show us our strength and resiliency, and to give us courage as we stand as land defenders and water protectors, nation to nation to nation. I'm really honored that I get a chance to speak. I hope that words take to action, and please know that the solidarity that I hold is one that's felt right across Mother Earth. And I say thank you, Nakamik, in my language, and know that I am there in spirit.
Okay, well, Cross Lake is central of Manitoba in Canada. It's a population of about 8,000. We are, many youth don't speak the language that I speak. They don't, many youth don't trap, many youth don't hunt or fish, but they are trying, so, you know, Sagit Menominee, I love you all. And yeah, Cross Lake is a very, very strong community when it comes to fighting hydro dams, when it comes to the time. And we always stand together when it comes to the time of engaging. But the youth over there are troubled. I can't really say troubled, but they are struggling to survive, I guess. They are struggling to keep our tradition and culture together. They are trying though, but it's really hard because of the hydro dams and the fluctuations of our waters over there. So the Genpig Hydro Dam is located about just a half hour outside of Cross Lake, maybe 40 minutes. So it's not far, it's just right there on our waters. It is very, it's not small, but it is medium-sized. They have about 5 doors that open up for the waters to go through, so the water flows. And the Genpig, we bumped heads with Genpig Manitoba Hydro before, and we got them evicted once. Our people got them evicted once, and they didn't like that so much. And now that we got them evicted, they have a little more respect for us, and hopefully there will be more tribes out there that can stand up to the dams and do what we did, and we encourage you to do that too. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, we stood up against them. It wasn't easy. We had our elders there. We had our children there. We had our mothers, our fathers, uncles, aunts, cousins. We had everybody there. We had our chief and council there. It was not an easy fight, but we did it. We got them evicted. Now they have a little more respect for us, and yeah, so forth, right? They, in a way, they are scared to engage, I can say, yes. We don't only hunt, trap, fish on one lake. There's multiple lakes that are connected to the Nelson River, which is where the dam is.
Right.
So, that being said, there are other places where it's shallow, where it's deep, so the water can go up to 12 feet high, 10, 8, you know, it's really devastating at times. They have not lived up to anything. We were supposed to be compensated for all the damages, but we haven't seen a penny. You know, it's really expensive to buy food from the store, so we have to go out hunt, trap, and fish for our foods. And that's hard too, to do that, because Well, when the water is up, the rapids are more violent. When the water's low, you can't even go through the rapids. And in the winter, the water comes up, the slush is there, people lose their machines, skidoos. Right. And when the water's low in the winter, there's gaps in the ice, so we have to go around, which is not really safe at all. So nobody wants to travel when the water fluctuates. I want to say hi to everybody in my territory. I've come down here for not just for my reserve, but for everybody, all our people on Turtle Island. We are one. Nobody's different. We are one. Let's stand together and fight this. Let's stand up against it. Let's let people know that we can do this. We are not alone. We have people from everywhere on Turtle Island that support us. We just got to find each other, stand together, stick with each other. So that being said, please don't stop fighting.
My grandfather was a canoe maker, and a lot of the stuff was lost when the river up north was dammed up Churchill Falls. He lost a lot of stuff. He never ever went on the river again. I guess it was said that it brought back memories of their things being destroyed.
My father and his father were all Grand River trappers. The river is extremely important to us as part of our identity. The river forms part of our culture, part of our heritage. The river was really, in a sense, our livelihood. The picture behind me, it's where my father and his ancestors would trap, and this is the land that they lived in.
Rivers were like roads. I trapped from about 1936 till 1948. You lived off the land, no big job getting food. If you didn't get any fur, you didn't get anything. That was our goal.
Brutal work. It's slavery to get up through those rapids. In some cases, you can't even do it with your kennel full loaded. And the only place we had to sell fur to was at the Hudson Bay Company. And they always kept their prices to keep us just barely surviving. They would never let us get ahead. They did it purposely to keep the trappers under their thumb. There was no other way to make a dollar.
When the land is flooded, the rotting vegetation sets up a reaction with the mercury that's already naturally in the water, and it creates methylmercury. It's a lethal toxin. The fish become contaminated, and the whole food chain is affected. And in fact, humans, if they ingest too much methylmercury, can sustain brain damage. On Long Point, for instance, there's a sign warning us not to eat too much fish right now. I'm skeptical that they're going to cut the trees, for instance, cut all the bushes, cut all the willows. When that goes underwater, that naturally has to rot, and we're going to have those same methylmercury problems that we had in the Upper Churchill project. We just looked on Menominee Island, for instance, and found mountain maple. The only place in Labrador where mountain maple is found. That species is going to disappear. Succeeding governments have promised that they're going to clear cut the flooded areas. But having come down the river, you can see the steep forested hills that are there. And it boggles the mind how they're proposing to clear cut that area. I'm very skeptical. There's nothing to stabilize the land, and you're going to have more erosion. More erosion means more sedimentation. More sedimentation means more sandbars, more turbidity in the water, which has implications for everything in the ecosystem.
Right now, you can't eat the fish because it's mercury, and it's going to be the same thing here. It's going to be mercury-filled fish, and then it's going to go on to the animals that travel on the land.
Ulukut Tracy Vunga Inulisima Vunga Guspemi Ananaga Inulisima Yuk Malagani. Hi, I'm Tracy Doherty. I was born in Happy Valley Goose Bay here in Labrador, and my mother was born in Mulligan, which is up the what's known now as the Hamilton Inlet, not far from Rigolet. It's in the Labrador Inuit settlement area, not quite in the land claims area, but sort of a portion of those land claims agreements. Back in 2016, I helped to protect the land and waters when the Muskrat Falls protection through Labrador Land Protectors was happening. Currently, I'm working on a project federally funded but provincial in scope, which is aimed at reducing the homelessness which Indigenous people are experiencing across the province. More particularly, I'm really interested in the homelessness that's occurring in this community where rental rates are through the roof. There is very little to rent. Housing costs are exorbitant. All of these have increased since the Muskrat Falls project, which was predicted by various groups that were concerned. And certainly in the joint review panel that happened back in 2011-2012 when those 84 recommendations were made and not met as to setting some baseline data regarding community well-being so that it could be tracked what the impacts were from development. We are certainly seeing, though, the negative impacts. And what particularly interests me as I'm working on this project is certainly, housing and homelessness is really being featured nationally since COVID hit, and that's sort of been a silver lining, I guess, to the cloud that it's pointing out some issues that needed to be addressed. In the larger hubs, of course, homelessness has been happening for a long time. We really had not experienced this phenomenon to the degree that's occurring now. The gap between haves and have-nots has really grown. And the thing is, here in our community, most of the people that are earmarked or identified using these terms homeless or transient are the Inuit and the Innu. And how can we be homeless or transient on our homelands? So we're sort of at an origin point of these social phenomena occurring. So I think we have the opportunity to address them now. So I'm very thankful that there are a variety of initiatives happening because Indigenous people are becoming more empowered. Our land claims processes are somewhat controversial because they are always based on, the agreements that the government will get to develop our lands. Yet at the same time, we have to take the good with the bad there and see that we're gaining ground in promoting our worldviews, which certainly include distribution of wealth and resources among all the people, because that's how human beings have survived, is through that kind of cooperation. Sorry about that, I got a little distracted when someone came to the door. So we are gaining a voice, and our worldview, which is very different from that which the Euro worldview that we encountered at Contact was. we're learning more about ourselves and how we are connected to each other and how we are still connected to the land and how we need to protect it and our waters. So I'm very grateful that organizations like NAMRA are helping to promote this Indigenous Day of Mourning. It's a very welcomed gathering, and I'm happy to add my voice. So I'm there with you, and please know that we're part of the fight. Thanks. Nakumiswak.
And God, they make it hard to live. They make it hard. They make it hard to survive, to get the fish, to get the moose, the ducks, and the geese. But we're going to risk our lives, and we're going to keep going, because we saw a dam that was decommissioned. A New English word I learned. It was decommissioned, and it no longer exists. And 20 years later, the fish are coming back.
Land of boundless beauty, where the untamed rivers run, and majestic snow-capped mountains rise to meet the morning sun. There are silent, sunlit valleys, undiscovered, unexplored. It's a home for free of spirit. It's a land called Labrador. Legends of our people spoken in the language of the land tell of hard times and endurance strangers would not understand, as they trekked across the tundra from the highlands to the shore. Promise of the land is broken, and our people suffered more. Let her mountains shine and glory, let her unspoiled waters flow. Let her children live in freedom in the valleys of the snow. Lift your voices, sons and daughters, like you've never done before. Let your song rise through the darkness in this land called Labrador. Lift your voices, sons and daughters, like you've never done before. Let your song rise through the darkness in this land called Labrador. In this land called Labrador.
We're proud Nunatuhavut, Inuit and Innu, and we all belong to this land Labrador. Once more we are haunted by crooks that come running to infringe on our rights and exploit from our shore. They come to destroy our land just for profit, not caring a damn about those who belong. 'cause they stand to gain by whatever is taken from the water, the forest, and the land we live on. The proof is all there out in the back country, where all of the trees and the flowers have died. Get in a canoe and paddle the river out there on the calm Mercury tide. It's time to wake up from this tired old deception that we have no say about matters at home. We proudly now stand for what's right for our children and save the Grand River before she is gone. What will it take for the Premier to listen and learn to accept what is right from the wrong, and stop this abuse you inflict on our heritage down through the years as the cycle goes on? Many are jobless and poverty-stricken, no hope for a future, forgotten alone. This only happens in communist countries, not here in this land of the free as it's known. When ignorance prevails over logic and reason, it throws all democracy into the wind. People take heed, for if this were to happen, society plunges straight to a dark end. It's time to wake up from this tired old deception that we have no say about matters at home. We proudly now stand for what's right for our children and save the Grand River before she is gone. We proudly now stand for what's right for our children and save all our rivers before they are gone.
Sugali swagwake glunya gohe ni yungets wage sklay wage ni wagitalot nen onya taaga ni Sugali, hello. My name is Glunyako, which means she takes clouds from the sky. My English name is Sarah. I'm Bear Clan from the Oneida Nation. I have been asked to speak about my nephew, Jonathon Tubby. Jonathon was killed by the Green Bay Police Department on October 19, 2018. He was pulled over for a routine traffic stop. During the stop, the police realized that he had a warrant, and it was for a non-violent crime. He actually, it was for a DUI, failure to turn himself in. So during that time, they on the way to the police station from where they had arrested him, he had managed to bring his cuffs around the front of his body, and they when they got to the police station, there was two officers, the Officer Warnicki and Officer O'Brien of the Green Bay Police Department. Officer Warnicki was a trainee and Officer O'Brien was a trainer, and Officer Warnicki was the one who did the initial search and cuffed Jonathon. During well, like I said, during the ride he was able to get his hands to the front, and when they got to the Sally Port, the procedure is for the officers to go to the trunk, remove their weapons, their belt, all those things, and then the jailers are to remove the person in custody and bring them in. Well, Officer Warnicki had finished putting his stuff in the trunk, and Officer O'Brien was still taking care of that, putting his stuff in the trunk. And when Warnicki came around and opened the door to get Jonathon out, he put his hand on Jonathon's knee, and Jonathon said, "I'll do it." And Warnicki had mistaken this for something else, maybe. So he shut the door quickly. He went behind the trunk, and he told Officer O'Brien, "Something's not right." So Officer O'Brien took his flashlight, looked over the open trunk, and said, "Jonathon has a gun." And that set off numerous domino effects. With that being said, other officers had been called to the Sally Port. And through depositions, the family, we have a civil lawsuit right now with Green Bay, the city of Green Bay, and the Brown County. The Sally Port is at the Brown County Jail. So during this time, through depositions and different things, we have been able to see the video of Jonathon in the back of the car. And never, and both officers have admitted this too, but never do you see him, acting up. Both officers said that there was nothing wrong in the ride. He wasn't being rude or belligerent or disrespectful or anything. And so it was really a typical ride from the place of arrest to the Sally Port. And when Officer O'Brien had flashed his flashlight over the trunk into the back seat of to see Jonathon, according to the video, what we've seen is that Jonathon was actually leaning forward. And he had his hands in front, and he was leaning forward, and you see Officer O'Brien's flashlight, and it can only see the back of Jonathon and the back of his head. So the idea of him seeing a weapon, a gun, we just don't even understand where that came from, where he was able to see a gun. So numerous things happened after he had stated that other officers were showing up from Green Bay and Brown County. A Bearcat was brought in, and there was numerous canine there. There was four canine that had eventually came into the Sally Port when there was different officers that had came up with ideas of how to get Jonathon out of the car, less lethal plans to get Jonathon out of the car. And one of them was to have two officers come up with the shields with a canine, open the car door, release the canine on Jonathon, and the canine was expected to drag him out of the car. That was the plan. Well, that plan was shut down, and another plan had came into play, and what it was to shoot out the back window from the Bearcat and release OC spray. When that idea came up, one of the officers asked, "Well, then what? Then what's going to happen?" And there was no then what. There was no, okay, the next step will be this, and the next step will be this. There was nothing. That was all that they came up with. So they did that. They broke out the back window with a wooden toggle. They cleared out the window, and they sprayed OC into the car. And from the video that we've seen, it sprayed, Jonathon had turned around and it sprayed him right in the face. And before that happened, the officers were asking Jonathon to wipe off the windows because it was fogging up because he was nervous, he was agitated. And he did do it once. And then eventually that's when they broke out the window, and when they sprayed him, it sprayed him right in the face. And it wasn't just a small canister of OC, it was a larger canister of OC. It was the size of canister they use for crowd control. And they sprayed it right in his face. And when they sprayed it, out of reaction, he jumped out the back window. And when he jumped out the back window, he was standing on the trunk of the car. And at that moment, there was roughly 20-25 police officers from the county and the city in the Sally Port with him. And some were even standing outside the Sally Port door. So when they shot him with the beanbag gun, when he was standing on the trunk, it hit him in the abdomen, and he fell and ended up falling off. And when he fell off the trunk of the car, he was so disoriented from the OC spray. We were told that he ran into a transport van because he couldn't see. If you've ever been sprayed with OC spray, pepper spray, anything like that, it really skews your senses. And so that's what happened. He ended up running into the transport van, and then he started running towards the exit of the Sally Port to the big garage door. And at that time, he was shot again with another beanbag, and at the exact time that was happening, they had released a canine on him. When the canine engaged, it engaged on his backside and brought him down. So this is all within seconds. And at that point, another officer, actually Officer O'Brien, came from outside the Sally Port around the door and shot 8 shots into the Sally Port, 5 of them striking Jonathon, and all of them were in a downward pattern. And he was shot in the back of the head, the back of the neck, and 3 of them in the back of the left shoulder, all while being engaged by a canine. During depositions, we've asked, where did the other 3 bullets go? We've been told one was in the wall, one was in the door of a officer's vehicle, and the third one, we never got an answer. We don't know where the third one went, which is really concerning. There's a lot of things that happen. This happened really quickly. All this went down very, very quickly with him. In the video, when he's in the back of the cop car, we can hear him, we can see him, and he's very confused and he's asking, why is this happening to me? Why is this, what's going on? What are you guys doing to me? And he's crying, in different parts of it he's crying, and he's no one's answering him, and they're asking him to clear off the windows, to show his hands. And at one point they asked to show his hands. He said, okay, I will, but I'm really scared. Why is this happening to me? I can't. And to hear his last words, I'm scared. Why is this happening to me? That never leaves you. 2 years later, and it never leaves you. We talk about police brutality happening, in big cities, in inner cities, but it's happening in small town Green Bay too, and nothing's coming about. Changes haven't been made, and that's a big part of our lawsuit, is asking about systematic changes. They told us there was no recording video in the Sally Port and no audio, so that's one of the things we asked for. We asked for body cams, to hold the officers more accountable. And with Officer O'Brien, the harder, another piece that makes it harder is that he's been promoted, so now he's a sergeant. So he was able to come from outside the Sallyport Inn, shoot recklessly 8 shots, 5 hitting a man who was face down, hands out in front, still cuffed with a canine engaged in his backside, and to kill him. And there's so many procedural questions and so many things that they didn't take care of. They talk about trying to de-escalate a situation and how some of the officers have training in that, but nobody took those steps. They talk about how there's officers trained to work with people who may have mental illnesses or other things like that, and none of those steps were taken. And so it was really unfortunate that Officer O'Brien wasn't charged by the DA, and we kind of expected it when they told us, when they sat us down and told us. And so it's really it's been a tough 2 years. It's been a long road, a lot of healing, continue to heal. When we talk about how when people pass away, as Indigenous people, we have certain protocols and different things we do to mourn and take care of ourselves and take care of our family. And with this, it's different, because it was preventable. They didn't have to kill Jonathon. They didn't have to take his life. They took a young man from his family. And so it's been a tough 2 years, and we're not done fighting. Right now, we're waiting to see if we're going to be allowed to go to trial for our civil lawsuit. Jonathon's mother, Nina, is my older sister. His father, Dean, has a sister by the name of Sue and her husband, Arlie. And the 3 of us, Sue, Arlie, and myself, we are the administrators of his estate. We're the ones working with the attorney for the lawsuit. And it's been a tough road. As Indigenous people, we have certain ways that we take care of our loved ones when they pass on. And when the situation as it unfolded and the more information we were finding out at that time, I was really heartbroken and sad. And one of my fears was, does he know he was killed? Does his spirit understand that? Because we talk about those spirits who are lost, and so I was able to talk to 2 of our cultural leaders, our traditional leaders, and talk to them about going to get his spirit. That was really, really important, so he could continue on. Because I didn't know if he knew. It happened so suddenly. He was disoriented. Did he know? Did he know he was killed? So I'm thankful that those 2 men, Bob and Art, were able to go get his spirit for us so we could send him on his journey. It's been tough. Jonathon was my mom's first grandchild, and he was the first boy in a lot of generations. My grandma had only girls, my mom had only girls, so we were really blessed when he came along. And to both sides of the family, he meant so much. He was very special, and he had a smile that could light up a room. He would sing and dance, and he always wanted to make sure everyone was taken care of. He always wanted to make sure that we were safe, and so we're really blessed that we did have him. And we're so heartbroken and devastated that he was taken from us. You know, that night he was killed, they left him. By 9/11, they said he was dead. And they left him on that floor till 5 a.m. And it's to think of him laying there, you know, and to worry about his spirit. We would never do that to our people. We would never do that to anyone. And that just goes to show they don't care. They don't care whose life they just took. Every day I think of him. We all miss our boy so much. Our families struggled for 2 years with this, and we're not done. Our fight's not done. And we talk about issues in amongst the indigenous communities, you know, and we've been out there saying his name and trying to get acknowledgement for what happened and support. And it's hard. It's really hard, you know, and I've said it dozens of times, you know, when you talk about indigenous issues, we're always working hard to get our issues acknowledged, and how do we get, you know, guidance, and what do we do? And we're ghosts on our own land. We're invisible on our own land, and we're constantly waving our arms like, you know, this is happening. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, you know, police brutality. Indigenous people are the highest killed by police, but nobody knows that, because we're constantly having to fight just to be acknowledged as Indigenous people. Just for people to understand we're still here. And then on top of it, all these other issues that we face. And it's not gonna end. You know, we're gonna keep fighting for everything, you know, for acknowledgement, for Jonathon, for missing and murdered. You know, and that's happening everywhere. Not just, like I said, in the big cities. It's happening on the reservations. It's happening in Little Green Bay. And it's so unjust and it's so unfair that we have to go through this. And for the sake of Jonathon, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be fighting. And I'm going to be saying his name and acknowledging who he was and what happened to him. That his life was taken from him. That he was taken from us. And in such a way that is so cold-blooded and so unjust and heartbreaking. So, to the people who've reached out to us and who have supported us and who have said his name and carried banners and marched with us and marched for us, Yawango, thank you guys so much. The love and support we got, not just from our community, but all over Indian country and all over in different from different organizations, Yawango, that's given us the strength to keep fighting, that's given us the strength to keep moving forward. We really appreciate it, and our fight's not done, so please continue to support us. But Yawango for your guys' time, for listening. Gunlunk.
Greetings, brothers and sisters, compañeros and compañeras. I want to thank the organizers of this event for the opportunity to speak on such an important day, as it is National Day of Mourning, a day to remember, to commemorate the legacy and the resistance of our Indigenous ancestors, our culture, our Indigenous identity. My name is Lucy Paguada Quesada. I am a teacher, human rights defender, social communicator, and the official coordinator of the Libre Party. And the Libre Party is the political arm of the Honduran resistance. The Honduran resistance is the social movement that was born in Honduras in opposition to the U.S. military coup against our constitutional president Manuel Zelaya Rosales, and under the administration of President Barack Obama and his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Honduras is a very small country in Central America with a population of only 9.5 million. It is also a country that has suffered, just like the rest of the countries in Latin America, historic centuries of colonialism, neoliberalism, and imperialism. First in the hands of the Europeans, and later in the hands of our very own country, the United States. Honduras is also a country of multi-ethnic groups, 8 groups to be precise. The first one is the Lencas, and the Lencas are the original group from where our environmentalist leader, indigenous leader Berta Cáceres was from. As you remember, Berta Cáceres was murdered by the oligarchy in Honduras in defense of the rivers and in defense of the water. We continue to demand justice for our martyr, Berta Cáceres. Then there's the Chortís. The Chortís are the original descendants of the ancient Mayans in Central America. But then there's also the Pesh. There is also the Tulopanes. There is the Nahuas. There is the Tarahuacas, the Misquitos, and the Garífunas. The Garífunas are the original descendants of Africa. And there are many Garífunas who live in the United States, particularly in New York, and very specifically in the Bronx. Honduras is a country that has suffered too many disasters, political and also natural. Political disasters such as I mentioned before, the coup, but also electoral fraud, impositions by the United States, such as the imposition of the puppet narco dictatorship headed right now by Juan Orlando Hernandez. But also it's a country of U.S. militarization. It is the house of the Comando Sur, the South Commander. The largest military base, U.S. military base in Central America, it is in Honduras. And it was established there in 1982. And it was the house of the Contras. The Contras that went to fight the Sandinista movement and the revolution in El Salvador. So Honduras is a country of U.S. military bases. It's a country that has been militarily occupied by the United States. However, Honduras is also a country that resists. And we resist politically and we resist socially. When I talk about the frauds, in 2013, we experienced the first brutal and open electoral fraud maneuver and orchestrated by the U.S. Embassy in Honduras, who decided that they were going to steal the elections from our candidate of Libre, Xiomara Castro de Celaya. Then the second fraud was in 2017, when we formed an alliance and our candidate also won the elections. But the United States decided that they wanted to continue to impose the puppet, the narco puppet, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who ran in a re-election when in Honduras, re-election is prohibited. Again, we have to remember that the coup created the conditions in Honduras for the worst social, political, and economic chaos. A chaos that forces the people of Honduras to live in caravans by the thousands, entire families, pregnant women, little children, families with members that have special needs, but they don't care. The situation in Honduras is unbearable. The violence, the repression, the persecution, people being murdered on the streets, or the possibility of dying of hunger because the poverty level it's above 70% for the great majority of people in Honduras. So people risk it all. They decide to leave. For them, it's better to go and to risk their lives trying to survive than to stay in Honduras and knowing that they will die or that their children will die. We also talk about the situation of natural disasters. Honduras has been struck by many natural disasters, hurricanes. We could think about Hurricane Mitch. And as we are speaking, Honduras is being struck by 2 hurricanes in 1 week. So the situation only deepens of misery, of instability, and unrest. But I have news for you. In Honduras, there is hope. The people continue to organize there and here. And our objective is to get in power. And we continue to work towards that objective with the Libre Party, which is the only alternative of the people, just like the Mass Party in Bolivia. And we know that what is happening in Latin America inevitably will happen in every country. The people that have liberated themselves, like the people of Cuba, like the people of Venezuela, like the people of Nicaragua, like the people of Bolivia. And we know that the United States has a plan for these countries to not allow them to be completely free, because the United States plans to continue to hold these countries hostage as their neo-colonies, to continue to extract their resources, their natural resources, no matter what they have to do. Killed the leaders like Berta Cáceres, it doesn't matter, as long as they can take our resources. But the people continue to resist. And the best example that we just had is the people of Bolivia, the indigenous people of Bolivia, that the United States took away their government and overthrew President Evo Morales. And in 1 year of resistance, overcoming the most brutal repression, racism on the hands of the worst haters and fascists, like the dictator that was imposed on the Bolivian people. Regardless, they were able to take power again. So those are the kind of examples that we are following. And we need to do the same here in the United States. Bring down capitalism and get rid of neocolonialism and work towards a socialist society. That's the objective. That's what we need to do. This is what the people of Latin America are doing. This is what the people of Honduras are doing. And this is what the people of the United States need to do. Power to the people, power to the indigenous people, power to the Black people, power to all people. Venceremos, resistimos hasta la victoria siempre.
Kai ko'o ka moana kailana nei Hawaii nau e wehe a halulu ka honua a haumea na kulukulu e ka lani ki e kaumai luna au e ke aloha ole a ka malihini.
Oh, he avale o kopu alikoa o ke ave.
Me ko kamalala valula me ka kuhi hewa. Alu mai pu alu mai me ko mano kalani po. Ka I mai ana me na kama ka hele lani. Poki ae inu vai ava he vivo ole a hoku pa a o he hope ho I mai ai ana I vale no ka kou malihini. Ele mau kako e na mamo aloha. Ile vehi a ali I vehi nani o ku'aina. Hoea mau no ka pono sivila. A hoi ho ia mai ke ku'oko'a.
Kuha'aheo, Hawaii, Mama Kakawa, Ku'aina, o ke uka kahiaka, o na oiwi o Hawaii nei, no ku'ula hui e hawi pau, ai o la mau.
Kuha'aheo, Mama Kakawa,
Ku'aina, o ke uka kahiaka, o na oiwi o Hawaii nei, no ku'ula hui e hawi pau, ai o la mau. No ku'ula hui e hawi pau, ai o la mau.
no ku'ula hui e ha'awi pau, ai o la mau.
Indigenous people, shine your light, we are equal. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Get ready for the glorious comeback of our people. Oh, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up. All nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's the time. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's the time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull them back and let go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope. Yeah, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to my marrow, I will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah, I resurrect. Yes, you can bet that we seen the single mama raising children on the res. We seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We seen the children take their lives when they can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. Can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war, but we've seen it all before. And now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. We are the ones Grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up.
Pueblo hermoso, levántense, es nuestro tiempo.
No tienes que esconderte más.
Ahora es nuestro tiempo.
Mujer indígena, tú eres tan sagrada. Traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, respetamos tus ancestros y la suya cultura. Hombre indígena, tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive. A pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable, yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz y no vamos a escondernos más. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz y no vamos a escondernos más.
They say that history is written by the victors. But how can there be a victor when the war isn't over? The battle has only just begun, and Creator is sending his very best warriors. And this time, it isn't Indians versus cowboys. No, this time, it is all the beautiful races of humanity together on the same side, and we are fighting to replace our fear with love. And this time bullets, arrows, and cannonballs won't save us. The only weapons that are useful in this battle are the weapons of truth, faith, and compassion.
Solidarity from occupied Lenape land here in New York, from within our lifetime, United for Palestine. We are a Palestinian-led community organization building the movement for Palestine throughout New York City since 2015 to revitalize the revolutionary spirit of Palestinians in exile in pursuit of a free homeland. Today, on the 51st Annual National Day of Mourning, we are honored to have the opportunity to share this message of solidarity and struggle with the United American Indians of New England and all Indigenous people struggling for sovereignty and self-determination everywhere. Because Thanksgiving is not a celebration, it's a day of mourning.
Every year, on May 15th, Palestinians around the world commemorate the Nakba, or a catastrophe in Arabic, where nearly 1 million Palestinians were ethnically cleansed and over 500 Palestinian villages were destroyed or depopulated to make room for the settler colonial state of Israel. Today, Palestinians make up the largest refugee population in the world, and we're still denied the right to return to the land our ancestors were forcibly expelled from at gunpoint 72 years ago.
The contrast every year between Palestinians collectively mourning of the Nakba and Zionist celebrations of Israel's founding is one that we recognize all too well here in the U.S., where Thanksgiving celebrations take place as Indigenous people come together to mourn the ongoing genocide and ethnic cleansing of your people.
It is not only a shared experience of settler colonialism that binds us together, but a shared legacy of anti-colonial resistance and a shared struggle to defend and reclaim sovereignty over our ancestral land. As Frantz Fanon once wrote, for a colonized people, the most essential value, because the most concrete, is first and foremost the land which will bring them bread and above all dignity.
Here in New York, we are seeing this play out in real time. On November 1st, the Warriors of the Sunrise, a group of Indigenous women from the Shinnecock Nation, launched a month-long occupation of the Aboriginal territory at Canoe Place along Sunrise Highway in the Hamptons. After the Shinnecock Nation erected a monument along the highway last year as part of a new economic development plan, the state of New York filed a lawsuit against the nation claiming that the monument was not on Aboriginal or sovereign lands.
As explained by Warriors of the Sunrise, the Shinnecock people are suffering due to hundreds of years of violent settler colonialism. Many are living in poverty, and there is rampant food insecurity. This baseless lawsuit, which has cost the Shinnecock Nation potentially millions of dollars, is an attempt to obstruct the Shinnecock Nation's economic development and strangle its ability to meet the basic housing, education, and food needs of its tribal members.
We join Warriors of the Sunrise, the Shinnecock Nation, and our comrades in the East Coast Freedom Council of the Red Nation in demanding that Governor Andrew Cuomo and Attorney General Letitia James drop the lawsuit and stop waging economic warfare against the Shinnecock Nation.
At the end of the day, the only path forward is resistance. And it is in this spirit of struggle, solidarity, and internationalism we must chart a course for the future and continue to fight for collective liberation from Turtle Island to Palestine.
5, 4, 3, 2. Heni Holtu. I want to thank United American Indians of New England for the invitation to address this 51st annual National Day of Mourning. As is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, we must first acknowledge the land on which we stand, the land which sustains us, the land which holds us. Here in the greater Boston area, we are on the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation, who continue to this day in part through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. In acknowledging the land, we are making certain agreements with our hosts. One such agreement is to support every effort by our host tribe to repatriate the land and natural resources back to the original peoples. My name is Jean-Luc. I'm a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe. I'm originally from New Orleans. And back home, along with my mom and with my sister, we are the Tunica Biloxi Singers and Legend Keepers of Marksville, Louisiana. Before I begin my remarks today, I want to open up in a spiritual way and offer a song, which is one of my great-grandfather, Joseph Alcide Perit Sr.'s favorite songs. This is the horse dance song, the Tunica horse dance song. Yo e kania, yo e kania, yo e kania, ya teti manore, ya teti manore, yo teti manore, yo teti manore, yo teti manore, yo teti manore. Hey yo ha, hey yo ha, hey yo ha, hey yo ha. Hey yo ha, hey yo ha, hey yo ha. Ya kania ya no ya hene ya ne no ya hene. Hene na ya hene na. Hene na hane ya hene na. Ya kania ya no ya hene ya ne no ya hene. Woo! Tikach, thank you for allowing me to share that. I wanted to bring in my family and my people into this time because I'm here in Boston, away from my tribal homelands, and I am serving as the president of the board of directors of the North American Indian Center of Boston. I am one of thousands here in Boston as the urban Indian community. Our community started off as a series of held series of meetings in 1969 and did the work to incorporate as the Boston Indian Council in 1970, October 20th, 1970. So this past October 20th, we marked our 50th year of service to the New England Native American community. In 1976, we were designated as the state's liaison between residents who are members of tribes currently outside of the borders, but who have government-to-government relationships with Massachusetts, such as the Penobscot, the Mi'kmaq, the Maliseet, and the Passamaquoddy. And over time, we have come to recognize the universe of tribes who have ancestral and cultural ties, but who are outside of the current borders, such as the Abenaki in Quebec, and the Delaware Nation in Anadarko, Oklahoma. We're complementary to the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs, who is the state's designated liaison between residents who are members of tribes inside the current borders, such as the Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, and the Massachusetts. And in 1991, we reorganized as the North American Indian Center of Boston. And this past year, we have, as we have done for 50 years, looked after the well-being and provided cultural and social services for our community. And albeit at this time in this pandemic, we have to do much of that remotely, such as how I'm coming to you today. And we have also had to navigate a lot of challenges. To date, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health does not disaggregate American Indian and Alaska Native data when it comes to COVID-19 reporting. And we have done everything that we can to serve on health equity advisory committees to ensure that the message is clear that this form of discrimination is unacceptable. We have also taken measures to ensure data sovereignty through the guidance of partners such as the South End Technology Center, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Boston Makers. We conducted our own PPE distribution campaign in which we distributed upwards of 1,000 masks, not just to North American Indians, Alaska Natives, First Nations peoples here, Native Hawaiians as well, but the broader Indigenous community that lives here in Massachusetts, such as the Quechua speaking congregation in Milford, and Mayans Without Borders. So we have navigated COVID-19 to the best of our abilities. We've also risen to the challenges of the calls for racial justice and standing as Native Americans in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Earlier this year, we organized our own march, our own demonstration, in coalition with the New Democracy Coalition, United American Indians in New England, BDS Boston, and many more, Sisters of Calabash, incorporating not just Indigenous, but Afro-Indigenous as well into an art action entitled Dismantle Now, in which we deconstructed white supremacy on City Hall Plaza. And we have visited the State House, the old State House, excuse me, where the Boston Massacre site is, and paid honor to the site in which Crispus Attucks lost his life some 250 years ago. Many of the issues in which we are faced with today deal with things that have persisted for centuries. Over 500 years ago, Columbus ravaged the Caribbean and invaded the Taino and Arawak. And NACOB has been there, aligned with United American Indians in New England, to push for the city of Boston to permanently remove the Christopher Columbus statue from Christopher Columbus Waterfront Park. And we will continue to push for Boston's Parks and Recreation to change the name of that waterfront park. And we have been in coalition with New Democracy Coalition, who has sought to change the name of Faneuil Hall, recognizing not just enslaved Africans, but Indigenous enslavement and the impacts of that on our communities. And of course, with King Philip's War happening 345 years ago, we are standing in solidarity with the Chabangangamug Nipmuc band of Indians as they seek to protect the graves on Boston Harbor Islands, Long Island in particular. And we also seek to change the harmful imagery on the state seal and motto. So many things that have happened over centuries ago still have resonance even today. And we have pushed these issues because we are hoping to improve our community's civic engagement and hoping to improve their confidence in the public institutions in which we have to navigate. Not just to appease these public institutions, but also to push them and challenge them. Because when it comes down to it, the United States and all of its public agencies, state and municipal, on down, they all must recognize that there is a government-to-government relationship between the United States and the indigenous nations. And so NACOB is there in the city of Boston. NACOB is also here at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And we have pushed these issues on the federal level and at the United Nations. So I just want to express my own personal gratitude for my staff, for my executive director, Raquel Halsey, for Gloria Colon, for Dwayne Fennessy, for Reggie Alkevich, for Ella Jake Blackowl, and all Jimmy Williams, Joe Dedham, all of our staff who go above and beyond for our community, day after day, putting in the long hours and making sure that our community is safe and that our community progresses in a good way. So I want to thank everybody here once again for joining in on this broadcast. And I just want to ensure that everybody keeps up the pressure and keeps up the spirit of political resistance on not just the National Day of Mourning, not just this weekend of mourning, but all throughout the year. Indigenous Peoples Day is every day. Tikach.
Warmest greetings from the Cordillera region, northern Philippines. My name is Bestang Dakdakan. I belong to the Kankanaay Igurut Indigenous Peoples in our region. I am currently the Secretary General of the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, an alliance of 307 organizations of indigenous peoples and various sectors in the region that work to promote our rights as indigenous peoples and human rights. I am also the Asia Program Director of Land is Life, a global indigenous peoples network. Our organizations stand with you in today's commemoration of the annual National Day of Mourning. We are with you as you celebrate today the struggles of indigenous peoples in the United States as well as elsewhere in the world. Like you, indigenous peoples in the Philippines and various other countries in Asia have survived colonization, but until today, we remain struggling against oppression and rights violations, especially by our respective states. In the Philippines, indigenous peoples, especially environment and human rights defenders, are being extrajudicially killed, arbitrarily arrested and imprisoned, harassed, threatened, and labeled as terrorists by the state through the police and the military. And all of these are happening almost on a daily basis. False charges of murder and various other crimes are also being filed against us. Our organization, the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, is currently facing intensified attacks by the state. And worse, these attacks have escalated during the COVID-19 pandemic from March of this year up to the present. Betty Belen, a community leader who strongly opposed the Kalinga geothermal project of Chevron in Kalinga province, is now facing false charges of illegal possession of explosives after these were planted by the police and military in her house last October 25. Our brothers and sisters in the communities are constantly being harassed and threatened by the police and the military, accusing them as members and supporters of the armed revolutionary group New People's Army. Every day at Facebook, terrorist tagging and vilification materials against indigenous leaders are being posted by the military, police, and their supporters. But this terrorist tagging political vilification are very dangerous because in our experience, these have been the precursors of extrajudicial killings. For instance, U.S. citizen Brandon Lee has been red-tagged and vilified prior to him being targeted for extrajudicial killing. Luckily, he survived. It is clear to us that the state is doing this to stop us from opposing destructive projects like large-scale mining and dam projects, and to silence us from defending our human rights and our right to self-determination as indigenous peoples. But we could not stop because our ancestral lands, natural resources, and culture are legacies that we have inherited from our forefathers, and that now it is our responsibility to leave it behind intact for future generations to enjoy. On September of this year, we launched the campaign called the Defend Cordillera Peoples Alliance Campaign Against Plunder and State Terror at international level. And it is our hope that indigenous peoples and advocates support each other in various ways in the challenges that we are facing these days. We encourage you to take part in the global pact to defend the Cordillera. You may get in touch with us for more information on how you may be able to support and how we can continue forging solidarity for indigenous peoples through the organizers of this event. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this meaningful event. Long live international solidarity.
Our comfort. Urban Atabex, New York City, standing for all indigenous people, ourselves, and for the freedom of Leonard Peltier. Solidaridad! Liberación! Freedom!
Peace! Joy!
Justice!
Abundance!
Free all political prisoners now!
Free all